It begins with a question so chilling, so unsettling, that even the most seasoned royal watchers are still struggling to process it. What happens when the man groomed his entire life to be king suddenly becomes the most vulnerable figure in the monarchy? Nobody expected this. Nobody imagined this moment would come so soon. And absolutely nobody believed the royal family, the institution built on silence, strength, and stoicism, would ever tremble the way it is trembling right now. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But here we are. Tonight, the palace stands on the edge of collapse. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Doors slamming behind panicked aides. Security sprinting through once quiet royal hallways. Whispered orders that carry more fear than clarity. And at the center of all of it, Prince William, the man the world always assumed would be the calm in every royal storm, now lies in a hospital bed, fighting for stability, fighting for his future, fighting for something far bigger than a title. Some inside the palace are saying it exactly as it is. It is finished. But finished how? Finished for who? And why now? You're going to see that this isn't just a story about a medical emergency. It's a story about pressure, about silence, about the emotional war inside the monarchy, about the truth Kate can no longer hide, about the secret conversation she had with King Charles just minutes before everything fell apart, and about the exact moment the monarchy began to crack from the inside. The palace wants you to believe this is a controlled situation, that things are stable, calm, predictable. But that's the public version, the sanitized one, the one polished by PR teams and edited by handlers who treat information the same way they treat crown jewels, locked away. The real version? The one insiders whispered in panic? The one that leaked through trembling voices and hastily sent messages? It's darker, it's heavier, and it's unraveling faster than the royal family can contain it. Because this didn't start today. It didn't start when William was rushed to the hospital. And it didn't start with the shocking announcement from Charles and Kate. It started long before that. And that's where this story truly begins. Ask yourself something for a moment. When was the last time you saw William as relaxed, confident, and grounded as he once was? When was the last time he appeared in public without that thick, unspoken tension lingering behind his eyes? When was the last time Kate smiled with genuine lightness, without the strain of someone carrying the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders? Exactly. Even you felt it, didn't you? Even the public sensed it. Something was building. Something was wrong. And the palace did everything in its power to hide it. But pressure has a limit, even for royals. And the cracks finally burst at Kensington Palace, behind a door many royal staff members now refer to as the room where everything changed. What happened in that room? Why were Charles and Kate locked inside for nearly 14 minutes without a single advisor present? Why did an aide who passed by say she heard Kate whisper the words, "He can't keep going like this"? Why did Charles walk out pale and speechless seconds before William collapsed? You see, when news broke about William's sudden hospitalization, the world heard a scripted announcement crafted by seasoned professionals. But inside those walls, the moment was chaos. Real, uncontrolled, terrifying chaos. There were no cameras, no careful lines, no royal sparkle. Just raw fear. Kate reportedly froze in place. Charles reportedly asked the same question 3 times in a row. And as William was carried out, one security officer had tears in his eyes. Tears. Ask yourself, when has that ever happened in the modern monarchy? Exactly. Something about this moment shook the system in ways the palace wasn't prepared for. Not emotionally, not politically, not symbolically. And the truth is, William wasn't just dealing with a medical emergency. He was dealing with months of internal pressure, unresolved conflicts, and physical strain that sources say he dismissed because, in his words, there was too much at stake. But what was at stake exactly? The monarchy? His father's legacy? His own future as king? The well-being of his children? The growing divide with Harry? The relentless scrutiny directed at Kate? Or something else entirely? This story matters right now because the succession line, the very foundation of the monarchy, has never looked this vulnerable. The royal family has survived scandals, divorces, affairs, abdications, tragedies, public fury, and global media assaults. But this? The possibility that their most stable, most dependable, most future-shaping member could be compromised? This is different, because William isn't just the next monarch. He's the monarchy's scaffolding, its stabilizer, its continuity, its future. And without William, everything becomes uncertain. Kate knows that. Charles knows that. And insiders say one reason Charles was reportedly visibly shaken is because he understands exactly how fast the monarchy can crumble when the future is threatened. This is why this moment is so frightening, so unprecedented, so historic. But that's not all. There's a detail, small but shocking, that insiders keep repeating. The hospital was put under a special high-security lockdown typically reserved for threats against senior royals. Not health emergencies. Threats. Why? Why would they need that level of protection? What were they afraid of? What information were they trying to prevent from escaping? Why did certain senior officials arrive within minutes, not hours? And why did a palace aide reportedly whisper, "This is the scenario we prayed would never happen"? These are the contradictions the palace couldn't control. These are the inconsistencies the public is now piecing together. And these are the cracks leading to the biggest question of all. What exactly pushed Prince William to this breaking point? Because insiders say it wasn't just physical. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was something more. Something heavier. Something nobody wants to name. Something Kate tried to warn Charles about moments before William collapsed. And now the world is left waiting. Watching. Clinging to every update. The monarchy, for the first time in decades, has no clear direction. No clear path. No certain future. Even the carefully worded announcement from Charles and Kate felt strained, emotional, heavy, and the sentence that raised the most alarms? He is in critical condition, and we ask for privacy as we navigate this extremely difficult time. Privacy. That word again. The palace uses that word only when the truth behind the scenes is far more devastating than the public version. And now you start to see why this is a turning point. Why insiders are whispering that this could reshape the monarchy forever. Why the royal family is trembling in ways they can't hide. Why Kate has barely been seen. Why Charles's voice trembled when he spoke. And why aides are describing this as the darkest moment since the death of Diana. The real story is not just that William is in the hospital. The real story is why, and what the royal family is desperately trying to avoid admitting. Because something happened in the hours leading to William's collapse, something that triggered absolute panic inside the palace. Something that forced Charles and Kate to make a decision that may change William's fate, the monarchy's future, and the entire trajectory of the British royal family. This is the moment everything began to unravel. And this is where the truth starts. Because before the ambulances arrived, before the palace locked the doors, before the world knew anything, there was one single moment that shifted everything. A moment inside Kensington Palace. A moment no one was supposed to hear. A moment that insiders say is the real reason the royal family is terrified. And that moment? That's exactly where Chapter 1 begins. Because what happened behind that closed door, between Kate, Charles, and William, set off the chain reaction that brought us here. And once you hear it, everything else will make sense. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever noticed how the biggest tragedies never arrive with warning alarms, flashing lights, or dramatic build-up? They slip in quietly. They arrive in the spaces where people assume safety. They strike in the moments where routine masks disaster. And that's exactly how it began inside Kensington Palace. Quietly. Almost too quietly. Here's a question for you. What does silence sound like in the home of the future king? You'd think it would be peaceful, regal, controlled. But on that day, the silence inside the palace didn't feel peaceful at all. It felt like a warning, a shifting pressure in the air. The kind of silence that comes before a storm you don't see coming, but somehow feel in your bones. And then it happened. A scream. Short, sharp, piercing enough to slice through marble hallways. It didn't come from a child. It didn't come from a panicked visitor. It came from an aide, one of William's closest staffers, someone trained for composure, someone who wasn't supposed to lose it. But that scream was the sound that changed everything. Because that scream, that single, raw, trembling sound, signaled that something had gone horribly, catastrophically wrong. And seconds later, the palace went from silence to chaos. Footsteps thundered across polished floors. Radios crackled. Doors slammed open. A voice yelled for help. so loud that security teams on the far side of the residence heard it and sprinted. Inside the private East Wing, Prince William had collapsed. Now, ask yourself this. How bad does a situation have to be for a royal aide, trained, polished, emotionally reinforced, to scream? Because aides don't scream. Not in the monarchy. Not under pressure. Not even during emergencies. They stay composed. They stay silent. They stay predictable. But this broke protocol. It shattered composure. It ripped away the calm mask that royal staff were like armor. When security burst into the room, they found William on the floor, not unconscious, but frighteningly close. His breathing was unstable, his pulse erratic, his skin pale in a way that made even the most experienced staff freeze. One guard later told another, "I've never seen him like that. Never. Not once." Think about that for a moment. William, the marathon-running, early-rising, duty-driven future king, now fighting his own body in the one place he was supposed to be safe. And just feet away, Kate stood frozen. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't even moving. She stood completely still, as if her mind couldn't register what was happening, as if the moment had ripped a hole through her sense of reality and left her suspended in disbelief. And when security asked, "What happened?" she didn't answer. She couldn't. Her lips were trembling too violently. One of the medics later said Kate looked as if her entire world had just tilted off its axis. But this part is important. William didn't collapse randomly. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't out of nowhere. There was a moment, just minutes before, when something happened in the private study down the hall. A moment that insiders keep referring to as the trigger, the catalyst, the spark that set everything in motion. A moment involving Kate and Charles, in a conversation no one else was allowed to hear. We'll get to that. But first, let's stay inside that room while William struggled for breath. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone trying to stay conscious? That desperate, disoriented look? The frantic blinking? The way their body fights while their mind slips in and out? That was William. He was trying to speak, trying to stay awake, trying to keep control, because William has always been the one who stays composed, the one who never cracks, the one the public trusts to stay grounded even when the world feels chaotic. But on that floor, he wasn't a prince. He wasn't a future king. He was simply a man whose body had finally said, "Enough." And that's the part nobody saw coming. One of the guards kneeled beside him and kept saying, "Stay with us, sir. Stay with us." His voice cracked on the second repeat. Another aide rushed to get his medical file. Yes, royals have private on-site medical documentation for emergencies. And when the file was opened, there was a note scrawled by a private physician from a recent check-in. A warning. A serious warning. A warning William ignored. Why did he ignore it? Responsibility. Pressure. Expectations. Or something else entirely. Hold on to that thought, because it ties directly into what happened moments before the collapse. Within minutes, paramedics were rushing into the palace. But here's the part that raised questions. It wasn't the standard medical team. It wasn't the regular ambulance protocol. It was a specialist emergency unit that is rarely deployed unless a senior royal's life is believed to be at risk. And the moment they arrived, the palace security protocol changed instantly. Gates closed, guards positioned, media scanners activated, staff phones confiscated, and 3 senior officials were notified at the same time. The Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, the head of MI5. Think about that. This wasn't treated like a fainting spell. This wasn't royal precaution. This wasn't routine. This was treated as a national security event. Because if something happened to William, everything changes. Succession shifts. Public stability shakes. International confidence wavers. And the monarchy enters unknown territory. Now, picture the scene as medics lifted William onto the stretcher. His eyes were half open, fighting to focus, as if he knew that losing consciousness meant losing control. Kate stepped forward, finally moving after what felt like a lifetime. She reached for his hand, but her fingers were shaking so badly that she could barely make contact. One of the medics asked, "Has this happened before?" Kate didn't respond, but the silence might have been the most telling answer of all. Now here's where it gets even more unsettling. As William was being wheeled out, a single phrase escaped from his lips. Faint, slurred, but chilling enough that a nearby guard whispered, "What does he mean?" The phrase was, "Tell him. I tried." Tell him who? Tried what? Tried to stop what? Tried to fix what? Tried to protect whom? This is where contradictions start to pile up. This is where insiders begin arguing about what William meant. This is where the palace's silence becomes suspicious. Because inside the command center, where staff track every protocol, someone reportedly said, he knew this was coming. And another replied, Kate warned him. She told him he couldn't keep going like this. That brings us back to the real spark, the moment that occurred just minutes before the collapse. The moment between Charles and Kate. Before William fell, Kate and the king were locked in a private room. Witnesses say their voices were low, tense, urgent. No shouting, but strained enough that a staff member later said the atmosphere felt electric, like the air before lightning hits. What were they discussing? What secret did Kate finally share? What truth was too heavy to carry alone? Staff saw Charles step out of the room after that meeting, and his face was described as ashen, drained, even haunted. And then, less than 60 seconds later, William collapsed. Coincidence? Or cause? That's the question insiders are arguing about right now. Let's return to the palace as the ambulance pulls away. Kate tried to follow, but Charles stopped her. Not physically. He simply said her name softly, but with a tone that carried more authority and more fear than she'd ever heard from him before. Catherine, wait. She looked at him with eyes filled with panic. And according to one staffer, her voice cracked when she said, I should have told him sooner. Told him what? That's the piece no one will talk about. And here's where something even more chilling happened. The moment the ambulance reached the gates, reporters were already assembling. Far too quickly to be coincidence. Someone leaked. Someone inside. Why? To force the palace's hand? To expose the truth? Or to sabotage something? As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Charles and Kate were ushered into a private car. And for the first time since Diana's passing, witnesses said Charles looked lost, completely, utterly lost. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? Charles has faced scandal, death, pressure, backlash, and decades of public scrutiny. He rarely cracks. What do you say to a man who wakes up at the edge of his breaking point? What do you say to a future king who opens his eyes not with strength, but with fear? Because when William's eyes flickered open in that hospital room, just for a second, just long enough for him to speak, Kate leaned forward, breath caught in her chest, waiting for clarity, comfort, something. Instead, William whispered 3 words that made her freeze completely. He knows now. Imagine hearing that from someone who just collapsed. Imagine hearing that from a man who'd been unconscious moments earlier. Imagine hearing that from the heir to the throne, someone who shouldn't be speaking in riddles. Kate took a step back, almost stumbling. Who is he? What does knows mean? What revelation was William talking about? The nurse glanced between them, clearly confused, but she didn't ask questions. She couldn't. The weight of the moment was too thick, too heavy, too frightening to interrupt. And that single phrase, he knows now, sent Kate's mind spiraling back to the conversation she'd had with Charles. The conversation she'd kept secret. The meeting that had lasted barely 14 minutes, but carried more emotional force than the previous 14 months. Because yes, there was something Charles learned that day. Something Kate had carried alone. Something she'd tried to protect William from. But now, William knew that Charles knew. And that changed everything. Let's go back, minutes before the collapse. Picture this. Kate walking swiftly through the palace hallway. Her steps tight, controlled. Her face pale, but determined. Her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles were white. She hadn't slept well for days. She'd been holding herself together with the fragile thread of duty. But that morning, something snapped. She told her private secretary, I need to see His Majesty. Alone. His Majesty. Not Charles. Not Papa-in-law. Not the grandfather of her children. His Majesty, because formality was the only way she could keep herself from falling apart. Charles agreed immediately. He knew something was wrong the second he saw her. Kate never barged into meetings. Kate never interrupted his morning schedule. Kate never asked for privacy with that tone. That thin, cracking tone that sounded like someone who'd been trying to hold a collapsing world together with sheer willpower. Catherine, Charles said softly. What is it? But Kate didn't speak. Not for a few seconds. Not until the door clicked shut behind the last departing aide. And then she whispered, It's William. Charles frowned. He'd sensed tension around William for weeks. He'd noticed the fatigue, the dark circles, the stiffness in his posture, the quiet sighs that slipped through when he thought no one was listening. But he had assumed William, being William, was pushing through. He never imagined it was something worse. Charles stepped forward, lowering his voice. Is it his health? Has something happened? Kate's hands trembled as she lifted them to her face. Not to cry. She hadn't crumbled yet. But the gesture was instinctive, the movement of someone who had reached the limit of her capacity to endure. It's everything, she said. His health, his stress, the pressure, the thing he hasn't told you. Charles stiffened. That last part. The thing he hasn't told you. Hit him like cold water. What thing? Kate hesitated. For 10 whole seconds, she hesitated. Now pause and think. Why would Kate hesitate? Why would she struggle to say it? Why would she be afraid to tell the king something about his own son? The answer is simple. Because whatever she was about to reveal wasn't just sensitive. It was dangerous. It was destabilizing. You don't hesitate before sharing small concerns. You hesitate when you're about to upend the stability of the monarchy. Kate took a breath. He's been hiding how bad things are. How bad? Charles pressed. Bad enough for Kate to lose sleep. Bad enough that she'd kept it to herself for weeks. Bad enough that she'd reached her breaking point. He's not coping, sir, she finally said. Physically, emotionally, he's shutting down. And he won't tell you because he doesn't want to disappoint you, or worry you, or look weak. Charles exhaled, a long, pained breath. He knew that William inherited his own tendency to bottle things up. He'd always admired William's discipline. But at that moment, admiration shifted to fear. How long has this been going on? He asked. Kate looked down. Months. And then she added something more devastating. He's had warnings. Warnings. Plural. Not one. Not an isolated concern. Multiple. What kind of warnings? Charles demanded. Kate opened her mouth. But the words came out like broken shards. Medical warnings. Charles's face drained of color. Medical warnings. For William. Unshared. Hidden. Charles stared at her. Why didn't he tell me? Because William, like his mother, has always tried to protect the people around him, even when it costs him personally. Because William believed revealing weakness would destabilize the monarchy. Because William carried burdens he should have shared. But Kate answered differently. More honestly. More painfully. Because he didn't want to fail you. Charles clenched the back of a chair, his knuckles whitening. Fail me? He is my son. My heir. He could never. But Kate cut him off sharply, something she had never done to him before. He could die, sir. Silence. Absolute stillness. Charles stared at her, his face pale, his breath shallow. And then Kate said something even heavier. And when he does too much, when he pushes beyond what the doctors warned him about, his body responds. This morning was the worst it's ever been. Charles sank into a chair, stunned. You're saying he's been hiding a medical condition? I'm saying, Kate replied quietly, that he's been pushing himself toward collapse. And today, I think he finally reached it. Charles put a hand to his forehead. Why didn't you tell me sooner, Catherine? Kate's voice cracked. Because he begged me not to. Because he didn't want pity. Because he didn't want to worry anyone. Because he wanted to be strong. For you, for the children, for the country. Charles whispered, half to himself. My son, my boy. He hadn't called William my boy in years. Not since Diana died. Not since the trauma drove a wedge between emotion and duty. But in that moment, William wasn't a prince. He wasn't an heir. He was Charles's child. A child who had silently carried too much for too long. And then Charles asked the question that terrified Kate the most. How long does he have? Kate's eyes filled with tears. Not because the question was inappropriate, but because it was necessary. I don't know, she whispered. But if he collapses again, the doctors said it could be. She couldn't finish. Charles stood up abruptly. We need to act. Immediately. Kate nodded. And then she said the final sentence that broke everything open. I think today might be the day we can't hide it anymore. Those were the words, those exact words, that William overheard. Yes, William overheard the conversation. He wasn't supposed to, but he did. He heard Kate say they couldn't hide it anymore. He heard Charles's fear. He heard the truth he'd been running from. And that, according to one insider, is what pushed him over the edge. That was the trigger. That was the final blow. That was the emotional rupture that sent him collapsing to the floor. His body reacted before he could process the shock. Now fast forward back to the hospital, moments after William whispered, "He knows now." Kate stared at him. "William, what do you mean?" William's eyes flickered again. "He knows." He tried to lift his hand, but couldn't. "He knows everything." Kate leaned closer, heart pounding. "William, listen to me. You need to rest." "The doctors." But William shook his head slightly. "No," he whispered. "It's too late now." Too late for what? Too late to hide his condition? Too late to stop the consequences? Too late to repair the damage of months of silence? He struggled for breath. "Tell him." "I'm sorry." "Tell who?" "Charles." "Harry?" "Someone else entirely?" Before Kate could ask, William lost consciousness again. Monitors beeped. Nurses rushed in. Doctors shouted orders. And Kate backed away, her heart hammering, her hands over her mouth. Because she realized something terrifying. William's collapse wasn't just medical. Something else had been set in motion. Something irreversible. Something with consequences bigger than a hospital room. Bigger than the monarchy. Bigger than anything the public knows. And the first shockwave was about to hit. Because at that exact moment, someone else in the palace received a message. A message that would cause the next royal explosion. A message that read, "It's out." Someone leaked everything. What do you think breaks a person first? Their body? Their spirit? Or the secrets they carry that no one else sees? Because William wasn't just collapsing from exhaustion. He wasn't just falling under the weight of royal duty. He wasn't just physically overwhelmed. He was breaking under a pressure so silent, so suffocating, so carefully hidden behind polished speeches and polite smiles that even the people closest to him only noticed fragments. And now, after that text message, after the words "It's out" appeared on a senior advisor's phone, the truth was no longer optional. It was no longer containable. It was no longer safe inside the palace walls. Someone had leaked the one thing William had fought hardest to hide. But let's step back for a moment. Let's go inside William's world before the fall. Back into the private space where the cracks were forming long before anyone noticed. Imagine waking up every day knowing the future of an entire monarchy sits on your shoulders. Imagine knowing that every misstep destabilizes an institution older than most modern nations. Imagine the expectations, the scrutiny, the weight of global eyes watching your every gesture, every sentence, every facial expression. William didn't inherit a crown. He inherited a burden. And for months, he'd been carrying something far heavier than anyone realized. Early mornings, late nights, meetings stacked on meetings, endless briefings, political pressure, global expectations, and beneath all that, something deeper. A condition he refused to acknowledge fully. A warning he ignored. A truth he tried to bury beneath work because slowing down felt like failure. One doctor had told him, not long ago, "You're pushing your system too hard." Another had said, "You need rest. This level of stress is unsustainable." A third had advised a temporary reduction of public duties, something William saw as impossible. Why impossible? Because duty, for William, wasn't optional. It wasn't a job. It wasn't a title. It was identity. It was purpose. It was his mother's legacy. Diana raised him to serve with heart and conscience, and William has never been able to separate who he is from what he feels obligated to do. But obligation can be poison when mixed with denial, and William was in denial. Now add on top of that the unspoken tension with Harry, the unresolved grief, the silent resentment, the years of fractured brotherhood, the emotional trauma he never dealt with because future kings don't have the luxury of falling apart. Add the pressure of raising 3 young children while carrying the emotional fragility of a wife who has been the monarchy's strongest pillar and its most strained one. Add the endless comparison to his father. Add the looming shadow of the crown he's expected to wear flawlessly. Add the political meetings, the national crises, the shifting public opinion, the private fears about the monarchy's future. Add it all together, and it equals one thing. A man cracking internally while pretending externally that everything is fine. Aides noticed small changes long before anything dramatic happened. He grew quieter, more distant, more tired, less patient. He stared into space more often. He rubbed his temples during meetings. He stood up too quickly, as if pushing himself forward physically prevented him from slowing down emotionally. And the most concerning detail? He started skipping meals. Not because he wasn't hungry, but because he didn't have time. That's the first sign. When someone believes they don't even have time to take care of themselves. But no one knew the full truth. Because William hid it. Not just from the public. Not just from his father. But from himself. Now rewind to the day before the collapse. A private briefing. A tense conversation. A message delivered to William that insiders claim devastated him emotionally. We don't know every detail of that briefing. But we know its consequences. A senior aide said William walked out of that meeting drained, shaken, and uncharacteristically quiet. He didn't go home early. He didn't cancel meetings. He didn't tell Kate. He powered through. He put on the mask. The future king mask. The unbreakable mask. And that mask stayed on even as his body screamed for help. But here's where it gets even more telling. 2 days before the collapse, William made a decision that now looks terrifyingly symbolic. He told an aide, "I'll rest after the weekend." Not before. But rest doesn't wait for permission. Neither does a breaking point. Neither does the truth. So now, back in the present, someone inside the palace sends a message. It's out. Someone leaked everything. Everything. Not the collapse. Not the critical condition. Not the hospital details. Everything. The truth William had fought to protect. The truth Kate feared. The truth Charles just learned. The thing they all thought they could contain until the right moment. Gone. Leaked. Exposed. Aides froze. Advisors panicked. Security teams doubled. Phones were seized. The crisis room erupted. Because if the truth got out, the monarchy wouldn't just tremble. It would fracture. Kate's private secretary gasped when she saw the message. One advisor whispered, "We're finished." Another said, "How much did they leak?" A third murmured, "We need to get ahead of this." But how? How do you get ahead of something the future king didn't even want to admit? Kate hadn't even processed William's latest words, he knows now, when her phone vibrated in her hand. A text from her own communications aide. "Ma'am, it's spreading." She stared at the screen. "What is spreading?" she typed back. The reply came fast. The truth about the condition. Kate felt the blood drain from her face. Her worst fear wasn't that William had collapsed. Her worst fear wasn't the hospital. It wasn't even the possibility of losing him. Her worst fear was the world discovering what he'd been hiding. And now, even as William lay fighting for stability, the truth was leaking into the very audience he'd hoped to shield from it. Before Kate could react, Charles walked into the hospital corridor. His face was strained, pale, exhausted, like someone who had aged years in minutes. "They told me," Charles said quietly. "It's already online." Kate shook her head. "It can't be. Not yet. Not like this." Charles handed her a phone. The headline glared on the screen. Sources claim Prince William ignored medical warnings for months. Another. Palace insiders say Prince William's health crisis was expected. Another. Royal family feared collapse long before emergency. Kate felt like she'd been struck in the chest. This wasn't speculation. This wasn't rumor. This wasn't exaggeration. This was the truth she had begged William to address, now being displayed to the entire world in cold, brutal headlines. But here's the twist. Not all the articles were accurate. Some exaggerated. Some twisted. Some invented details. Which made everything more dangerous. Because now the truth was tangled with lies. And the palace had lost control. Charles put a hand on Kate's shoulder and said the words that confirmed this wasn't just a personal crisis anymore. This could destabilize everything. Kate looked at him, her eyes wide, her voice faint. "What do we do?" Charles answered the way a man burdened by leadership answers. "We tell the truth, or the truth will destroy us." Before Kate could respond, a nurse rushed out with urgency on her face. "Ma'am, sir, you need to come inside. It's William." Kate's heart stopped. Charles inhaled sharply. What's happened?" Kate asked, her voice trembling. The nurse swallowed. "He woke up again. And he's asking for someone." Kate stepped forward immediately. "Me?" The nurse shook her head. "No, ma'am. He's asking for." She hesitated, as if afraid to say it. "His brother. Prince Harry." Harry. Of all the people William could have asked for, he asked for Harry. Kate froze. Her heart didn't just skip a beat, it plummeted. Straight down. Like a weight dropped into deep water. Because of all the names she expected William to utter, that one sat firmly at the bottom of the list. Buried under years of conflict, wounds, betrayal, distance, and fractured brotherhood. Why Harry? Why now? Why in this moment? When William hovered between consciousness and crisis. It didn't make sense. And yet, deep down, it made perfect sense. But Kate wasn't ready to face that truth. Not yet. She leaned against the wall, one hand gripping the edge of a railing as if her body couldn't hold itself up anymore. His brother, she repeated, her voice thin, distant, disconnected. The nurse nodded. He asked for him by name. Charles's expression shifted, not anger, not shock, but something more complicated. Something tangled in guilt, pride, regret, and a lifetime of choices that couldn't be undone. He hasn't asked for Harry in years, Charles said softly. Kate didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning too fast, spiraling in too many directions. Why Harry? Why not her? Why not George? Why not anyone else? Then came a deeper question, one Kate had buried under months of tension. Was William's breakdown connected to Harry? The nurse cleared her throat gently. He's awake again. But he's confused, disoriented. He keeps asking for his brother. Kate pressed her lips together, trying to breathe steadily, but her breath came out in tiny tremors. She whispered, almost to herself, this can't be happening. But it was happening. And the truth was, deep beneath her shock, Kate felt something else rising, something she didn't want anyone to see. Fear. Real, raw, unfiltered fear. Not fear of Harry. Not fear of the headlines. Not even fear of the monarchy crumbling. Fear of losing the man she loved. Fear of her children growing up fatherless. Fear of a world without the steady presence she'd built her entire adult life around. Fear that William calling out for Harry meant something irreversible had already begun. Kate felt the walls closing in around her. The pressure, the grief, the months of relentless strain, the burden of keeping secrets to protect William's image and emotional stability. And now, the leak, the collapse, the headlines, the panic, the global shock, the truth spiraling out of control. Everything she had been holding together was falling apart. Kate stepped aside, breathing unevenly. Her hands trembled uncontrollably now. Her shoulders shook. Her composure cracked. She had been strong for so long, too long, and the weight finally crushed her. Tears spilled silently down her face. Not dramatic, not loud, not cinematic. Quiet tears. The kind you don't even realize you're shedding until someone touches your arm. Catherine, Charles said softly. She flinched. She didn't want comfort. She didn't want pity. She didn't want a king consoling her. She wanted her husband back. Her voice broke. I warned him. I told him his body was breaking down. I begged him to slow down. But he didn't listen. He didn't want to be seen as weak. Charles lowered his head, ashamed. She continued, her voice rising with pain. And now he's lying in there, fighting, and the first person he asks for is the brother who abandoned him. She didn't mean it to sound harsh. It came from heartbreak, not hatred. Charles touched her shoulder gently. Catherine, that's not fair. Kate wiped her cheeks roughly. I know. I'm sorry. I just don't understand why he wants Harry now. Charles took a breath. Deep, weary, heavy. It may be because he fears losing control, or because he feels guilty, or because he knows he can't outrun the past anymore. Kate looked up sharply. What does that mean? She asked. Charles hesitated. William and Harry's story is unfinished, he said quietly. They've both been pretending it doesn't hurt. But it does. It always has. Kate stared at him, stunned. She had never heard Charles admit this. Not openly. Not honestly. Not with the weight of a father who knows he failed his sons in ways only they understand. But the moment was interrupted. Another nurse appeared, urgent, breathless. Ma'am, he's asking again. Kate inhaled sharply. I'll go, she said. Wait, Charles replied. I should speak with him too. The nurse shook her head. He didn't ask for you, sir. Charles looked stung, just for a moment, before covering it with royal restraint. Kate walked toward the room, each step heavier than the last. But halfway down the corridor, she stopped. Her body wouldn't move. Her mind wouldn't focus. Her vision blurred. She steadied herself against the wall, trying not to collapse under pressure that wasn't just emotional. It was physical. Hours of fear, hours of adrenaline, hours of carrying the emotional weight of three people, William, Charles, and herself, had finally drained her to the edge. A doctor stepped beside her. You need to breathe, ma'am. You're in shock. Kate nodded weakly. The doctor added, "You should sit." But Kate shook her head. "No, I need to be with him." She pushed herself off the wall and walked to the door. She paused, hand on the handle, heart pounding. This wasn't just a visit. This was a confrontation with the truth she had tried to protect William from, the truth he could no longer run from, the truth that now involved Harry. When she opened the door, William lay there, pale, fragile, trembling, a shell of the man the world recognized. He opened his eyes slowly when he heard her steps. Kate whispered, "I'm here." But William blinked, disoriented. "Harry?" Kate tried to smile, but the pain suffocated her. "William, he's not here." William frowned. Not in anger, in confusion, as if the world around him was misaligned, fragmented. "Needs to know," he whispered. Kate leaned closer. "Know what?" she asked softly. William swallowed, struggling. "He needs to know the truth before what?" Kate's heart dropped. "William," she said sharply, "don't say things like that." But he was already fading again. The nurse stepped quickly to the bedside, checking monitors. Kate backed away. She couldn't lose him. She couldn't accept that he was slipping. She couldn't accept that he wanted Harry before her. Because what did that mean? What did it reveal? What did it expose about William's state of mind? That something between the brothers remained unresolved enough to surface at the edge of consciousness. But as Kate stepped out of the room, trying to steady her breathing, an aide rushed toward her. "Ma'am." Kate turned. "We found the source of the leak." Kate straightened, every muscle in her body tightening. "Who was it?" she demanded. The aide swallowed. "It wasn't who we expected." Kate crossed her arms, her breath shallow. "Then who?" The aide hesitated, fear flickering across their face. "Someone very close to William." Kate's heart stopped. And the name they whispered next? It shattered everything. The name the aide whispered in that dim, echoing hospital corridor. The name that drained the blood from Kate's face. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't a rogue staffer. It was someone so close to William that Kate couldn't believe it. Someone William trusted. Someone she trusted. The leak came from within his inner circle. But not just any member. Not a distant advisor. Not a recently hired assistant. The leak came from one of William's longest-serving aides. A person who had been with him through triumphs, scandals, victories, losses, heartbreaks, global tours, royal births, and private family crises. A person William once described as the closest thing I have to a brother. Kate's breath caught. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Why would he do that? The aide didn't answer. Because nobody understood it. Nobody could make sense of it. Nobody knew whether it was betrayal, desperation, fear, or something even darker. And before Kate could question it, alarms sounded inside the hospital room. The shrill, piercing sound of emergency monitors flashing red. Nurses rushed past her. Doctors shouted instructions. Metal trays clattered. Doors slammed open. William was crashing again. Kate ran inside, and what she saw froze her to the core. William's body trembled violently. His hands clawed at the sheets. His chest rose and fell with terrifying irregularity. His pulse monitor spiked and plunged like a storm-tossed ship. A doctor shouted, "We need to stabilize him, now." Another, "His levels are dropping." Another, "Where is the senior consultant?" Kate stood there, trembling, unable to breathe. She felt herself slipping, fading, drowning in helplessness. The room was chaos. A controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. The kind that only happens when someone stands between life and catastrophe. A nurse grabbed Kate's arm gently but firmly. "Ma'am, please step back." But Kate shook her head violently. No, I can't leave him. I can't. The nurse kept her voice calm. "Ma'am, we need space to work. If you stay, you could get hurt." Kate's voice cracked with desperation. "You don't understand. He's my husband." The nurse's eyes softened. "I know, and that's why you need to let us save him." Kate backed away, her hands covering her mouth as tears streamed uncontrollably down her face. Charles rushed into the room moments later. When he saw William convulsing on the bed, his face broken away no camera had ever captured, no public ever witnessed. A doctor turned to him. "Your Majesty, this is critical. We need to ask for consent, now." Charles blinked, confused. Consent? For what? For an emergency procedure. Potentially invasive. Potentially risky. Charles staggered backward, gripping the wall as if the weight of the crown had suddenly doubled in mass. Kate turned to the doctor. What procedure? What are you talking about? The doctor looked from her to Charles. We've detected complications in his system. We need to determine the cause immediately. And we need to intervene before his heart destabilizes further. Kate felt her knees weaken. Her vision blurred. Her breathing quickened. Heart, she whispered. His heart. Yes, the doctor said urgently. This is more serious than we initially believed. Charles placed a shaking hand on the back of a nearby chair. What are the risks? He asked. The doctor hesitated, a hesitation that sliced through the room like a blade. Sir, the risks are significant. But if we do nothing, the outcome could be far worse. Kate's voice broke. Will he survive the procedure? The doctor didn't answer immediately, and that silence was louder than any words. Kate stumbled forward, gripping the edge of William's bed. She whispered in his ear, trembling. Please stay. Please stay with us. Please don't leave us. William did not respond. His breathing was shallow. His skin was cold. His pulse was unstable. A nurse called out, We're losing rhythm. Prepare to assist. Charles pressed a hand to his face, overwhelmed. His voice cracked for the first time. Do whatever you must. Save my son. Doctors sprang into action. The senior consultant shouted orders. Prep for emergency intervention. Get me the cardiac kit. Alert anesthesiology. He's slipping. Stay with me. Kate couldn't look. She could not look. She couldn't exist in that room without feeling like her soul was being dragged across a battlefield. Her mind flashed with images. William holding George for the first time. William laughing with Charlotte in the garden. William teaching Louis how to ride a bike. William standing beside her at the altar, eyes filled with light. William promising her they'd face the world as a team. And now he lay there, shaking, fading, and the doctors were fighting a battle that felt impossible. Charles stepped beside Kate and whispered, He's strong. He always has been. Kate nodded, but she didn't believe it. Not anymore. Not after watching him bleed himself dry for a crown he wasn't even wearing yet. She whispered, He's pushed too far, Charles. He never listened. He never slowed down. He never rested. Charles's voice trembled. And I never stopped him. Kate stared at him, startled. This was a confession she never expected from a king. He wanted to prove himself to me, Charles said quietly. I should have told him he didn't need to. Not natural? Kate repeated the words slowly, like each syllable was stabbing her in the chest. The doctor nodded grimly. Yes, that's why we need further tests. We need to understand what caused the collapse, and why the symptoms progressed so rapidly. Kate stared at him, frozen. Charles stepped forward, disbelief and fear blending into something far darker. What exactly are you implying? He asked. The doctor did not answer. Not directly. Not yet. We don't jump to conclusions, sir, he said. But we must prepare for all possibilities. All possibilities. That phrase was a bomb in the room. Kate grabbed the railing beside her, breath trembling. What are you saying? She whispered. That someone did this to him. We're not saying that. The doctor replied carefully. We're saying there are irregularities that don't align with stress alone. Kate's pulse roared in her ears. Irregularities? Not natural? What did that even mean? Before she could press further, the hospital doors burst open. A flood of palace officials poured into the hallway. Advisors, private secretaries, security chiefs, communications directors. All pale, all tense, all terrified of what this meant. The monarchy had officially entered crisis mode. A senior aide approached Charles and bowed his head. Your Majesty, he said urgently, we've activated the war room. The war room, the palace's internal crisis command center. Usually reserved for national emergencies, major political scandals, or catastrophic royal events. Never for something like this. Never for William. Charles hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. Very well, he said. We need to stabilize the situation, both here and within the palace. The aide nodded. The Queen Consort has been informed. The Prime Minister is standing by for updates. Commonwealth leaders are asking questions. And the media frenzy is escalating. Charles sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. The monarchy was beginning to fracture, not from scandal, not from scandalous headlines, not even from political backlash, but from fear. Real fear. Because if William fell, everything else would too. Kate tried to focus, tried to breathe, tried to stay present, but her mind kept looping around the same terrifying question. What does not natural mean? Kate whispered to herself. What if someone hurt him? Charles heard, and his entire body stiffened. No, he said firmly. Too firmly. We cannot assume that. But he wasn't convincing. Not even slightly. Because if there was one thing the royal family feared more than scandal, it was an enemy they couldn't control. Kate shook her head, tears pooling again. No, no, William doesn't have enemies. He doesn't live like that. He doesn't. Charles cut her off. Everyone in our position has enemies. Kate stared at him, horrified. Enemies? Was this what William had been carrying silently? Was this why he'd asked for Harry? Was this what he meant by he knows now? Before Kate could unravel it, a senior advisor approached. Your Majesty, he said, we need you in the war room immediately. There's an issue with the leak, and it's spreading faster than we anticipated. Kate turned sharply. What issue? She demanded. The advisor swallowed. It wasn't good. One of the leaked messages suggests there may have been interference. Kate froze. Interference? She asked. With what? The advisor hesitated. With William's health. Kate's heart dropped. Charles whispered, Dear God, Your Majesty, the advisor continued, this is escalating globally. American networks are preparing special broadcasts. Australian media is calling this the biggest royal emergency since Diana. European news outlets are speculating about succession. Kate swayed slightly. Succession? Her voice shook. William is alive, she said sharply. He's alive. They can't talk about succession. Charles put a hand on her shoulder. They're not talking about his death, he said gently. They're talking about the monarchy's stability if he cannot resume his role. Kate took a shaky breath. She hated that word, stability, because everything in her life at this moment was anything but stable. Charles straightened. I'll go to the war room. You stay with him. Kate nodded, though she felt like she was barely standing upright. As Charles followed the troop of advisors down the hallway, Kate turned back toward the emergency unit where William was being prepped. But before she took 2 steps, someone grabbed her arm gently. It was William's longest-serving aide, the one rumored to have leaked the information. The betrayal, the shock, the disbelief. Kate's body tensed instantly. You, she said, voice trembling. Why did you do it? The aide's eyes filled with regret. Ma'am, I didn't leak everything. I leaked only what I thought would force action. Force action. Kate snapped. He collapsed. He nearly died. The aide nodded desperately. That's why I did it. Because no one was listening. Because he kept hiding it. Because he was getting worse every day. Because he refused to slow down. Kate stared at him, devastated. And your solution was to expose him? The aide swallowed hard. My solution was to save him. He looked down. I've watched him deteriorate for months. I begged him to rest. I begged him to talk to you. I begged him to tell his father. But he wouldn't. He said it was all manageable. Kate whispered, What did you expect? That leaking it would help. The aide stepped closer. Ma'am, when you love someone who won't save themselves, you either watch them collapse, or you force the world to intervene. Kate's eyes widened. Force the world. Was that what William feared? Was that what Harry needed to know? Was that the truth Kate had whispered about? Was that why the doctor said things weren't natural? The aide continued, voice shaking. There was something else. Something he made me promise never to repeat. Kate felt her breath catch. What? She whispered. The aide hesitated, then whispered. He believed someone was targeting him. Kate froze. Her throat tightened. Her heart slammed. Her body went cold. Targeting him? She repeated. The aide nodded. He said he didn't know who or why, but he said he felt watched, pressured, followed. He kept telling me not to mention it, not to worry anyone, especially you. Kate shook her head. No, that doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't he tell me? The aide looked at her gently. Because he didn't want you to live in fear. Kate's chest ached. Fear was all she lived in now. Before she could respond, alarms blared again from the emergency ward. A doctor burst out of the room. Ma'am, you need to come. Now. Kate rushed inside, her heart pounding so violently she could barely breathe. William was on the table, surrounded by frantic movement. A nurse shouted, Pressure dropping. Another, We're losing rhythm again. The lead doctor turned to Kate and Charles, who had just hurried back from the hallway. We found the complication, he said. We know what's causing the instability. Kate's voice cracked. What is it? The doctor inhaled. It's not cardiac. It's systemic. Charles frowned. What does that mean? It means, the doctor said carefully, that something foreign is affecting his entire system. Kate's hand flew to her mouth. Foreign? As in, Charles began slowly, a toxin. The doctor didn't confirm, but he didn't deny either. We won't know until we run deeper tests, he said. But whatever this is, it didn't happen overnight. And it wasn't something he would have missed. Kate stared at him, horror spreading across her face. Are you saying he knew? The doctor nodded solemnly. Yes, he knew something was wrong. For a long time. Kate whispered, trembling. Oh my God, William. Charles gripped a chair for balance. Kate turned toward the aide. He said someone was targeting him, she whispered. Is that true? The aide nodded reluctantly. Yes, but he didn't want you to know. Kate felt her knees buckle. He didn't want anyone to know, the aide added. He said it would put everyone in danger. Kate almost collapsed. Danger? Targeted? Foreign agents in his system? What was happening? Before she could even try to understand, a nurse shouted. We're losing him again. Doctor, now. The doctor leaned over William urgently. Prepare for emergency intubation. Kate gasped. No, no, no. Charles caught her before she fell. And as the medical team swarmed William again, the senior consultant turned, his face grim. We need to move now, he said. Whatever is in his system is progressing. If we don't intervene. He didn't finish. He didn't have to, because the monitor went flat for a fraction of a second, just long enough for everyone in the room to feel their hearts stop. The doctor shouted. Code blue. Kate screamed. Charles staggered back. And in the chaos, as doctors fought desperately to revive the future king, one chilling question rose above the noise. If something foreign caused this, then who put it there? And why? Harry. Of all the people William could have asked for, he asked for Harry. Kate froze. Her heart didn't just skip a beat, it plummeted. Straight down, like a weight dropped into deep water. Because of all the names she expected William to utter, that one sat firmly at the bottom of the list. Buried under years of conflict, wounds, betrayal, distance, and fractured brotherhood. Why Harry? Why now? Why in this moment, when William hovered between consciousness and crisis? It didn't make sense. And yet, deep down, it made perfect sense. But Kate wasn't ready to face that truth. Not yet. She leaned against the wall, one hand gripping the edge of a railing as if her body couldn't hold itself up anymore. His brother, she repeated, her voice thin, distant, disconnected. The nurse nodded. He asked for him by name. Charles's expression shifted, not anger, not shock, but something more complicated. Something tangled in guilt, pride, regret, and a lifetime of choices that couldn't be undone. He hasn't asked for Harry in years, Charles said softly. Kate didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning too fast, spiraling in too many directions. Why Harry? Why not her? Why not George? Why not anyone else? Then came a deeper question, one Kate had buried under months of tension. Was William's breakdown connected to Harry? The nurse cleared her throat gently. He's awake again. But he's confused, disoriented. He keeps asking for his brother. Kate pressed her lips together, trying to breathe steadily, but her breath came out in tiny tremors. She whispered, almost to herself, this can't be happening. But it was happening. And the truth was, deep beneath her shock, Kate felt something else rising, something she didn't want anyone to see. Fear. Real, raw, unfiltered fear. Not fear of Harry. Not fear of the headlines. Not even fear of the monarchy crumbling. Fear of losing the man she loved. Fear of her children growing up fatherless. Fear of a world without the steady presence she'd built her entire adult life around. Fear that William calling out for Harry meant something irreversible had already begun. Kate felt the walls closing in around her. The pressure, the grief, the months of relentless strain, the burden of keeping secrets to protect William's image and emotional stability. And now, the leak, the collapse, the headlines, the panic, the global shock, the truth spiraling out of control. Everything she had been holding together was falling apart. Kate stepped aside, breathing unevenly. Her hands trembled uncontrollably now. Her shoulders shook. Her composure cracked. She had been strong for so long. Too long. And the weight finally crushed her. Tears spilled silently down her face. Not dramatic, not loud, not cinematic. Quiet tears. The kind you don't even realize you're shedding until someone touches your arm. "Catherine," Charles said softly. She flinched. She didn't want comfort. She didn't want pity. She didn't want a king consoling her. She wanted her husband back. Her voice broke. "I warned him. I told him his body was breaking down. I begged him to slow down. But he didn't listen. He didn't want to be seen as weak." Charles lowered his head, ashamed.